Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be going over my thoughts on PMQs. As usual, where Nadhim Zahawi did not do Sunak any favours by resigning to spare him the awkward questions. Still, it's not like Keir Starmer didn't have any other major concerns about the government, so Zahawi's untenable position only came up in the last few questions. And I know my conclusion is invariable that Sunak had yet another bad one, and he did. But you know how bad this one was? He had to break the emergency use Jeremy Corbyn glass again. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. Well now, Nadhim Zahawi had not resigned in time for PMQs. Well, he still hasn't yet. So the arena was set for Starmer to rip Sunak a new one over the latest disgrace to this Tory government, which is just bleeding out now. I said a couple of days ago, I could see Labour dedicating all six of the opposition leaders' questions to this one. And everyone could be from a different angle. It wouldn't need to be laboured. Every single one could be from a completely different angle. But as it happens, you know, when I suppose you've had nearly 13 years of what is probably the most brutal Tory government in modern times, there are always more human tragedies to draw attention to. Starmer spent half of his questions highlighting the murder of Zara Lina, killed by a man who would not have been free to do so if we had a properly resourced Justice Department. Starmer explained that the findings in the report on the murder say that opportunities were missed to save her life. He began by asking Sunak if he accepted the findings. Now, without agreeing that he did, Sunak was obviously at least advised to steer well clear of that one. He did echo the point that yes, there were failings. And then the reasons prime ministers will rarely explicitly say they accept findings is because in quite a lot of cases, ultimately it comes back to a ministerial failure. And then that's a named person, a colleague of theirs, that they have to say, yeah, they messed up. Indeed, Starmer went for that point. He said that the report noted that staff vacancies and excessive workloads were factors in the case. I mean, just as an aside, I mean, staff vacancies, excessive workloads, where do we hear that? Oh, everywhere in the public sector, everywhere. Anything that's run by the Tories today, staff vacancies and excessive workloads are there. But Starmer pointed out that these are ministerial responsibilities and again asked if Sunak accepts that. And yet again, Sunak ran 100 miles from the question. Of course he did. I mean, often with cases like this, you know, when it's like, when you talk about, oh, there were failings and, you know, and it shouldn't have really happened. Usually it's a case of it falls through the cracks. Someone just makes an error somewhere. You learn lessons, you change the guidance, you improve the training, and you try to avoid it happening again. But the issue here wasn't anything to do with that. It's that there simply aren't enough people in the probation service. There aren't enough staff because the government don't fund an adequate workforce. The staff who are there are overworked because they're doing the jobs of many because the government won't pay for enough workers in the department. So Starmer tried again. He said he'd spoken to the family who said the government had blood on their hands. He asked Sunak if he accepts that. Sunak expressed his sympathy. And then he talked about, I must have missed something here. I tried looking at it again. He said he's putting £150 million a year into the probation service. I thought, well, first of all, that's not a defence. Because if the service is short-staffed, whatever you're putting in isn't enough. In fact, I think Sunak must have made a mistake, though, because I thought, that doesn't sound very much. I didn't have time to check the current budgets. At some point I will. But for this one, I didn't quite have time. But I have ready access to quite a lot of funding from Labour's time in office because I've been gathering the funding data ready for the election campaign. So I can go on all sorts of things. And the funding for the probation service under Labour was well over £500 million with the money at the time. Not in today's money, it'd be well more now. In 1 year, it was like it did actually hit £1 billion. So I'm thinking, so he's saying he's spending 150 million on it now. And I was wondering if he meant extra. Must have meant extra, surely. In which case, it's still not a defence. Because if the money was, if you're having to put that much in extra now, Why weren't you putting it in before if it was necessary? And besides, I very much doubt any extra money is going into the probation service, because the government have been cutting funding for all departments, even the ones they're pretending to ring fence. When you consider it in real terms, all government department budgets have gone down, all of them. I hardly think they're putting it up for the probation service. Sunak also said that tough sentencing is important too. No, it isn't. This is a person who should not have been on the street. You know, when you talk about, toughening up sentences, you're talking about changing something because the sentencing regime or the guidance isn't quite right now. No. All the sentencing regime as it is now, the guidance as it is now, everything said that man should not have been free. Should not have been walking free on the streets. The sentence was immaterial. He was not free because of light sentencing, but because the probation service was understaffed. That was clear. It wasn't a legislative issue, it was a staffing issue. I actually thought Starmer might make this point more clearly and show that Sunak was blaming others again to deflect his own responsibility. He's done that in the past. In the event, he fired one more parting shot about Sunak having a nerve talking about protecting women, and then moved on to the tax-avoiding former Chancellor. No, not that one. No, not that one either. Nadhim Zahawi. Yeah, that former Chancellor. The current Tory party chairman, member of the cabinet as well. Starmer asked Sunak if he agreed that anyone who does not pay their taxes should not be in charge of the nation's money. Sunak tried to defend himself by saying, hey, this happened before I was Prime Minister. Now, it's true enough, Sunak did not make Zahawi Chancellor. But the next thing he said was not true. Sunak said that no issues were raised when he appointed Zahawi to his current role. Really? See, going back to last July, and I was commenting on the fall of Boris Johnson, it was all very exciting. And one of the more remarkable things to come out of the process was that Johnson had made Nadhim Zahawi Chancellor despite objections from officials. We later found out that these objections were almost certainly related to the investigation which started a few days later into unpaid taxes by HMRC, as well as the National Crime Agency. There was a whole lot of analysis on the situation from top tax lawyers, which I followed. Basically, I knew this. If I knew this was going on, of course Rishi Sunak knew as well. Now, granted, I have only just found out in the last week that Zahawi was found to have underpaid income tax to the tune of millions of pounds, and that he's paid a 30% fine on top of it. That is new information to me. But given that all this happened months ago, this is just because we only found out about it now. It hasn't only just happened now. This happened months ago. We've only just found out. And given that it happened months ago, Rishi Sunak absolutely knew. This is a stone cold lie. Sunak said that since last week, new information has come to light. If I was Starmer, I might have been tempted to ask exactly what information came to light for you, not us. What was new for you? Tell me. And be specific. He did ask what had changed since last week, but I think it was a bit more of a general question, which I think he knew wasn't going to be answered. But I'm not sure the question was really specific enough. But maybe it doesn't matter. I'm not going to criticise a prosecutor at the end of the day, because at some point this will come to a head and Zahawi will be leaving the government and Starmer will know this and he knows he's going to be bringing it back up. And maybe he's just thinking at that point, he can then ask Rishi Sunak exactly what he knew when he sacked him that he didn't know when he stood by him or even appointed him. Finally, Starmer went where I said he would go on Monday, pointing out that Sunak is just too weak. It's obvious enough. It's been a very productive line for Labour. You know, from the public's point of view, Sunak's obviously not squeaky clean. He's now been fined a second time in a year. But he's not seen as particularly grubby or corrupt either, by the standards of politicians, certainly not. Unlike with the Prime Minister we had a year ago. The scandals, they're not centred on Sunak. They're centred on his cabinet colleagues. It's like other people are letting him down. So Starmer points out that Sunak may well disapprove of the corruption himself, but he's clearly not strong enough to stop it. You know, he said Sunak was hopelessly weak. He even asked him if the job's too big for him. At which point Sunak took out a mallet from under the dispatch box and, as he has done several times before, broke the emergency glass and brought up Jeremy Corbyn. "Look at this," he said. "Look!" Actually, no, he didn't. But he did say that when he disagreed with the leader, he resigned, but Starmer did not resign from Corbyn's cabinet. Shadow cabinet, really. Although it's not quite true, is it? It's not really true. Sunak resigned when he judged Johnson to be weakened enough to topple him because we knew that he wanted the job. When Sunak resigned, nothing new had come out. He was just satisfied that MPs had finally had enough and it was time to trip him up. What was it he was pretending to disagree with? The Chris Pincher scandal? That was the final one that did it. He didn't resign when the details were revealed, did he? He only resigned when public opinion turned strongly enough to finish Johnson off. He didn't resign over Partygate, did he? No. As for Starmer resigning when Corbyn was leader, he actually did. He resigned on a disagreement in 2016. Not from the shadow cabinet at the time. But then what reason did he have to resign later on? Not that it matters, doesn't matter. It's a futile defence. It didn't work for Boris Johnson. It doesn't work for Rishi Sunak. It's just a sign of how they're so out of their depth that they're just fumbling for it. Yes, Corbyn was a major asset to them in 2019. Brexit was a major asset to them in 2019. It's not anymore. Bringing Corbyn up now, all it does is remind people that not only is he no longer the alternative as Prime Minister, he's not even a Labour MP. He's got about as much chance of ending up in government as I have, and I'm not standing for election. This was devastating for Sunak. I mean, you can always tell. And the thing is as well, people are getting to see it now because it happens so often. When he reaches for the Jeremy Corbyn defence, just like Johnson did. Because it's been pointed out so often now, people are just seeing it. Does he not realise that even using the line gets people who are less interested in it realising, oh, it must have been a bad one. He used Jeremy Corbyn again. Normally the comeback, what you do in the situation, you're up against it as the Prime Minister. You're getting battered all over the place. It happens. The comeback is supposed to be reel off a load of achievements. Now, in the current case, there aren't any, so you have to make some up. But they do that as well. Both he and Johnson have done it, in fact. List a load of made-up government actions. We're doing this while they're just made. Oh, row. It's easy to complain, isn't it? We're the ones making the tough decisions. We're the ones getting things done. But that wouldn't work this time, would it? Because it will increasingly fail to work as well because their delivery just isn't materialising. We're getting things done. What are you getting done exactly? Oh, well, we've put this money in there and this should improve and that should improve. You've been in power for 13 years. Why are we not seeing the improvements? All we see is your plans for improvement. Oh, we don't even see plans. We see aims. We never actually see the plans, do we? That's probably where it's going wrong. They are being seen as dangerously incompetent and corrupt at the same time. The twins of electoral defeat. Basically, with a double focus on how Tory underfunding and mismanagement of our public services are destroying lives, along with the snouts in the trough attitude of his close cabinet colleagues, if not himself, Starmer just basically gave Sunak both barrels. The first barrel hit the government's record on overseeing our national infrastructure. It's collapsed. The second blew another hole in his claim to be leading with integrity. He's not leading at all, of course. As Starmer points out, he's just too weak to lead. Johnson was a weak leader as well. Faced with confrontation, those close to him always said, well, he just tells people what they want to hear so they go away, that he couldn't handle confrontation. But he at least gave the impression, you'd only know that by listening to people who'd worked with him. You wouldn't know it as a casual observer. He sort of looked like he was in charge. Sunak's unable to even pretend. As I suggested after last week's mess, it's not just that he lacks political acumen. So does Boris Johnson. Sunak doesn't even surround himself with wiser heads to advise him. I mean, this is where Johnson was at least better prepared for being a Conservative Prime Minister. He employed the best con merchants around to teach him the ways of the grift. What do Sunak's advisors do? Take your seatbelt off, Prime Minister. It'll look much better when we record the video. Anyway, then Stephen Flynn for the SNP. Now, he took a similar line with his two questions, with a particular focus on the corruption. He asked what advice the Prime Minister would have for someone worried about their finances. He asked, he suggested, get someone to organise an £800,000 loan or set up an offshore trust in Gibraltar, apply for non-dom status, listing the fiscally questionable moves of Boris Johnson, Nadhim Zahawi and Rishi Sunak himself in one breath. Sunak then just rambled through the things he's pretending his government is doing to help, to which Flynn said, really sure what was that an answer to? It's not the question I asked, basically. He said, all you're doing there is protecting Nadhim Zahawi and Boris Johnson. He then said people in Scotland view the Tories as a parcel of rogues. Could have just said Tories, couldn't he? Isn't it? Isn't Tories basically Irish for parcel of rogues? Something very similar anyway. To which Sunak just responded that he was following due process with Nadhim Zahawi, which isn't true. When it comes to ministerial appointments, there isn't actually a due process. Actually, well, there is. The Prime Minister makes appointments. There's nothing written down about how they make those appointments. As long as they're a parliamentarian, to put someone in a position in government, they have to either be an MP or a member of the House of Lords. That's it. That's it. That's the due process. The Prime Minister can move people in and out of government as they see fit, for whatever reason they see fit, when they see fit. There is a normal procedure, a convention. That convention is that when a cabinet minister shits the bed, they are invited to kindly sod off with all possible haste. It used to happen within a matter of hours. Don't matter what sort of government, Labour or Conservative, you get this sort of behaviour. Well, maybe not this bad, but you get this sort of behaviour in all sorts of governments. Immediately it happens, they're gone. Gone. Because most governments value their reputation. It's not what's happening here. And it hasn't happened for a very long time. The newly established procedure is to brazen it out. And only if the public or the media continues to be outraged do you finally agree to get rid of them, after claiming new information. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.